All right. That'll be my job introducing Liminal Collective. But we have a very rare opportunity that I'm extremely excited to bring to everybody today to introduce you guys to a glimpse of what you can do in this world of AI. By a show of hands, who feels like the sea of AI is getting bigger and bigger every day? That's not going to change. So what this has created is a very, very rare opportunity to double down on what is going to give you the most success in this world, or in this whole expanding sea of AI. It's going to give you the opportunity to implement, to execute, and steer yourself through this ocean. So that being said, I want to introduce one of the founding partners of Liminal Collective. This gentleman has had over 30 years of implementing high performance and executing high performance across Olympic sports teams, top 50, Fortune 50 companies, and multiple edge divisions of performance. So that being said, I'd love to introduce Dr. Andy Walsh to the stage.
Thanks, brother. Thank you. Thanks, brother. Thank you so much. Just check the clock to make sure I stay on time. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting us here today. I'll set a little more context for you. I already saw some of the magical tools and projects and things you're going to be working on for the rest of the day, which are going to be so helpful to you. I'm going to give you a bunch of stuff that's not very helpful. I'm just here to really shift context and perspective for you. We spend our time focusing on humans. Our job is to think about how to get the best out of people, how to meet them where they're at, how to understand deeply who they are, and then really figure out what it takes to move them forward. And our context for a meeting like this is really to think about, given the trajectory of AI and technology is off and running, what does that leave for the human side of the equation? So we're going to talk about this. I'm going to make it a little fun. You can relax. There's not many notes you'll need to take. Some of it will be a little cool. Some of it will be interesting. And hopefully some of it's a little provocative. So we're going to focus on the human and machine conversation a little bit, but I'm not going to get into BCI and things like that. We're just going to talk about you as an individual, and in this staggering pace of AI development and growth, what can you control about yourself that brings the best of you to the conversation with the machine, if that makes sense. So a little more background. We've spent a career, myself and the rest of the community, and be very blunt, what I share with you today is the sort of summary of all these brilliant people that I get to work with who spend a lifetime working with even more extraordinary humans. The fun stuff when I spent time at Red Bull, the work that some of our colleagues have done in the government and defense space. We have a massive creative side of the program. You'll hear from both Jürgen and Ben from their careers later today. And then, of course, there's the athletic part of the world and the entrepreneurs and everything else. So what do? We try to understand everybody's story, everybody who's gone from A to B to C to whatever event or outcome that they're looking to at the top of their game, and we've just tried to collapse that into models. So the models we use, very generic one you see up there, but the way to think about this is if you would put yourself at the center of this model, as an entrepreneur or a business owner, or as a parent or as a partner, whatever it may be, there are things around yourself, things that we can look at, levers we can pull to optimize you. As I said, that generic model you have up there just gives you a sense of like a kind of bit of the classic side of the stop, the skills, what you're actually doing, the skills, the coaching. If you're in athletics, the nutrition, the psychology, the medicine. Also the other side of the equation when we start to get into the deeper human being. Doesn't really matter what you put in the center, whether it's a you, can be a team, and can be an organization. The best part about it is we just start to map out what it looks like. So for the last 30 years, we've been collapsing these stories and journeys of all these extraordinary performers into this model. What are the skill sets of the very best people in the world? We definitely don't care about what they do so much, but how did they practice and learn and grow to get good at what they do? When we think about their cognitive abilities potentially, how do they perform in very high stakes environments? Now, it's very interesting when you talk to someone who's getting up on a stage performing in front of a few 100,000 people in a music or an act. You compare them to someone who maybe as a business in the defense side, running through doors and facing challenges like that. Or you compare it to an Olympic medalist who's standing on the start of that 100-meter race and trying to get ready to take down the world with everybody watching. So all these lessons we collapse into this model. And the best part about it is it just gives us a toolkit that's ever expanding and also very powerful, because the people that have obviously done very well with these tools are simple things to cut and paste, if you like, into our lives. It doesn't really matter what you do, it's how you apply these tools. And we'll get into a little bit of that today. We also have a way of bringing the model to life. And the fun part about this model to life part of the equation, we call a 70-20-10 rule, if you like. It's about how do we take all that extraordinary information and focus a little bit? How do we focus it in? And the focusing part is what we call the 70% bucket. If we figure out, again, to be a business leader, you need the entrepreneurial skills, you need the accounting skills, or at least the budget awareness skills, you need the communication skills, you need the ability to actually challenge yourself and have vision and imagineering. That's the 70% bucket. That's the stuff that's about winning today. What are the fundamental things I need to do to win today? And in our model, we call that the 70% part of the world. We just talk that as table stakes. What gets more fun, though, is how do you win tomorrow? If the skills today, and I'll use the example of AI, are an ability to ingest and understand this ever-growing world, but what happens in a couple of years when all those tools collapse into maybe one, I was just talking to Jens about it, one internet? What happens then? How do we prepare for that? And then for all our models, we always like to call our moonshot program. This is called what we call winning forever. If we're doing the fundamentals pretty well and we've got a good base, we've got a couple of things we're working on that are kind of set us up for the next couple of years, we always have a small bucket on the side where we're thinking about what's right out there. And I think the beauty of this meeting today is you're seeing a great fundamentals, some great basic tools that already exist. But I know a lot of the speakers are going to present about things that are just on the edge and coming. And then hopefully through this interaction, you start to see things that are down the pipe. And I would challenge some of the speakers in this. I have no clue about AI myself. I use it, but I don't know how it works. But if some of the people up here are talking about the future state, challenge them to tell us, what are you seeing? What do you think's coming? Ask them those sorts of questions to set yourself up. So we're in the human business. We try to understand humans, and we're really fascinated by it. I figure a lot of you looking around the room spend your time in front of screens. It's a fair bet. So I thought I'd share with you a bit of a case study about one of the programs we're working on. So everyone recognizes working with NFL teams, football, soccer teams, Olympic athletes. They understand the work we do with creative artists. But we've also spent a lot of work in the last 20 years working with esports, gamers. That bled to what we call a hacker program. So how do you train the best hackers in the world? And that led to a program with the government, which they've tentatively called the Cyber Warrior Program. What it really means is people who have to sit in front of screens, make big decisions under a lot of pressure. So I figured if I share with you some of the things we're looking at there as a case study of how to bring the 70-20-10 to life, might just prompt some thoughts and ideas. Makes sense. So what we're doing is we're collapsing our model now. This is the other side of the equation. If that model sits there with all the best practices from all the best people in the world for the last 30 years that we've engaged with, now we're collapsing that and pointing it at a specific target. So again, I'll use cyber because it's an easy one and it's, I think, probably the more relevant to some of the things you're doing. But the fun part is just think about yourself in that equation. What are you doing for yourself to bring the best of yourself forward? And we'll give you the generic thing. So I'll show the first slide. This is a program we recently ran. As you can see from the video and some of the shots there, what stands out about this picture? These are hackers. They spend 12 to 16 hours a day in front of a screen. Do you see any computers? No. Hell no. We can't teach them how to do their job. What we can teach them is how to bring their their version of themselves forward. So each one of those buckets you see there, they're looking at themselves from a mindful and relaxation perspective, how to de-stress, how to regulate themselves after a tough day. You see a picture in the middle there with the big guy with the bald head like me. He's one of our world-class nutritionists. He's looking at how do we eat? What should we be eating to optimize brain performance and function? On the right, well, the bottom right, they need exercise. One of the things you'll learn as an entrepreneur and as a human is no matter what you're doing in any field of endeavor, a little walk, a little movement, a little breathing makes a massive difference to how your brain functions. So we get a little bit more advanced with this group. We teach them a little bit more how we maybe train an Olympic athlete. But the fundamental principle is they're doing the scientific side of it. And then the combination of the two water events are part of what we call our breath hold work or our surf survival program. We like to talk to them deeply about understanding themselves. If there's one thing I can leave with you today, it's the better you understand yourself, the more in touch you are with yourself, your self-awareness, the better you'll do at anything. Anything, doesn't matter. So in this particular example, the one where they're floating face down in the pool trying to hold their breath, who are they talking to? Themselves. Yeah, you're not opening your mouth. So that conversation between yourself, between that big old noggin and your brain and your body, that's what we're forcing them into. But what are we actually doing by making them hold their breath? Focus, comfort, or out of comfort. We're forcing them to talk to themselves as things get progressively harder. It's real easy to sit down in a room like this, have a PowerPoint up, practice and learn things that I'm talking about and go, yeah, I gotcha. That's not who you really are. Who you really are typically shows up when things are tough, when the plan goes to shit, when the world seems to be fighting you on every step of the way. That's when you learn who you really are. So if we hold you underwater for a few minutes, you get the sense of who you really are. We have a running joke in the program. How long do you want to hold your breath for? And most people will progress to 3 or 4 minutes in a couple of hours. We'll say, pick a number. We'll get you there. You might be conscious when you bring you up, but you'll get you that level of hold breath. And then the final exercise on the right is we get them up at 0 dark 30 in the middle of the night, and we drag them out off the coast and drop them in the ocean and see how they handle that little exercise. But these are normal day people. So we're incrementally challenging them for the idea of self-awareness and understanding. So the point I want to make with that example is we're focusing on developing their personal skills, their sense of self, their own awareness of what triggers them and what brings the best of them forward. We're not focused on the technical skill of coding or whatever it is, hell, they do as hackers. We don't even know for the most part. Does that make sense? So in your own lives, learning about yourself independent of the craft is the focus. And I'll make more sense as we get in the human machine. So to give you some takeaways, in our 70% bucket for cyber warriors, there's some real simple things. Moderate physical activity increased cognitive function between 5 to 8 to 14 to 15% of women. Just a basic walk in the park helps your brain. So if you're finding yourself struggling in day to day with the work and the load and everything, and you probably already know this, it's the trick of doing it, it's get out and take a walk. It doesn't need to be much. That's why people who own dogs live longer. Scientifically proven, because they have to walk the damn dog every day. It gets them outside. Cyclic breathing. Who here does any breath work as an example? Show of hands. Cheapest hack on the planet. Slow breath in. Everyone with me? Slow breath in. Pause. Make a little whistle as you breathe out. Pause. Slow breath in. Pause. Breathe out. One more time. Slow breath in. Pause. Breathe out. That simple exercise deregulates and downregulates, I should say, your heart. You cannot breathe slowly and have a heart rate that beats faster. So simple exercise like that. You'll see all these ads for all different type of programs. Doesn't really matter. Slow breathing means more relaxed. The slower you can breathe, the more you relax. When you're holding your breath underwater is a world record attempt. So the world record right now for a breath hold is about 11.5 minutes. If you want to breathe up for that, slow your breath down to hold your breath. They breathe in, and then they breathe out for about 20 seconds. No, I can't do it. But that extended exhalation slows the heart rate, lowers the stress. Simple as that. Sleep, all right. Who's sick of hearing about how much sleep they should get and how long they should sleep and all the rest of it? I'm in that category too. Doesn't really matter. If you are worried about your sleep, it's sort of counterintuitive to the idea of getting better night's sleep. So the reality is just trying to get a little bit of sleep in your life, if you can, is the trick. Dark room, nice and cool. Don't eat a ton of coffee or food a couple of hours before you go to bed. It ain't rocket science. You can buy an app that'll tell you that for $500, but I'll tell you that for 50 cents. The fun one that's really cool right now that we're seeing a lot of work on, if you do run out of sleep, so you've got kids or whatever, you've got a life, 20 grams of creatine really helps the brain focusing that sleep. So these are the simple things, the 70%. 20%, we're seeing some really fun stuff now to sharpen the brain, and it sharpens the brain because we think it replicates the deep sleep phase. It's a hot sauna. Hot sauna for 20 minutes. We're just starting to learn. Everyone knows it feels really good. But we're now just starting to see the science to say the reason it probably feels good is because it triggers the brain to flush out some of the toxins a little bit, just like a good night's sleep. Now, hot is hot. Hot's about 185. They do go up to 220, but that really gets toasty. You can cook the turkey next to you while you're sitting in the sauna. But 185 for 15 to 20 minutes, and you're really getting along an amazing thing. And actually, sorry, I've jumped to slide 4. It should be on this one. I'm looking at the wrong one. The other fun thing is nature. Who feels great when they go outside and walk in the woods? Well, again, we all know this stuff. Science is finally catching up. The reason being that they figured out when you're in the natural world, you're not seeing any lines. You're not seeing this linear world we live out inside and sort of set ourselves up with the modern buildings. It's the idea that the randomness of all the images actually tricks the brain into thinking like it used to thousands and thousands of years ago. And it cognitively resets you about 20% faster. So the idea in some countries is actually prescribed. A walk in the wood is an actual prescription you get from the doctor. The reality of it, we've now figured out why. So encouraging you, if you can, move outside, take a break, have a rest, get some sleep, and if you want, take some creatine. Now we get into some more fun stuff. You're not going to get access to this, but just to show you how deep we get into this space. Hyperbaric hypoxic training. Who's heard of altitude training to sort of help you get a little bit fit, a little bit stronger? So in the world of athletics, elite athletics, especially endurance like marathon, cross country, we take athletes up to high altitude, we train them for a few weeks, the body produces a lot more red blood cells, they get fitter, we bring them down just before the race and hopefully they win. Now these chambers have just come out. This is the cool thing about all this technology, and the machine sort of pulses it for you, is it takes you up to altitude and bounces you around that altitude. So between 10 and 15,000 feet every 5 seconds, up and down, up and down, up and down. Takes you up to 15,000, 15 to 20,000, up and down, 20 to 25,000. Now you're at the top of Everest kind of altitude. 25 to 30,000, pulse, pulse, pulse. Massive improvement here in cognitive potential cognitive recovery, but also physical recovery. The best part about it is we're seeing it as an early way of potentially augmenting treatments for dementia and Alzheimer's. So super fun, early stuff. There's only a few of them in the world, but it gives you a sense of how deep we go in with some of these athlete programs. Who's had their 23andMe or a gene test of some description done? Did you get anything useful out of that? Other than figuring out your ancestors were Vikings or something like that? The reality is, we've been for many years looking at the influence of genes on pathways in the body to influence your behavior. So you don't get this in your normal analysis, but we do a deep dive. What you're seeing here is a real interesting one that we look at a lot, depending on the sport or the activity you're involved in. And depending on the expression of this particular gene, you fall into one or two buckets, basically. You're either, and with my accent, you'll never hear the difference, warrior or warrior. Warrior or warrior, okay? One is metabolize dopamine really quickly, likes a lot of intention, likes a lot of action, quickly metabolizes, moves on to the next thing, kind of an addictive personality, if you like. One metabolizes it slowly, is much more cautious. So in terms of even the more advanced programs we do and building teams, which one do you want on your team? Both. A bunch of warriors and you're going to blow up everything, blow through your budget, take all that winnings, put it on black in Vegas here, and you're gone. But you don't want everyone sitting around procrastinating forever either. You need the balance. So just to give you a sense, where it gets really exciting, and now we're getting into the edgy stuff, and not many people in the world even see this, so you're kind of early on the stage, is what we call a digital twin. And this is where the AI, I knew I'd put some AI in here at some point. The advancement in AI has meant we're able to map human bodies at a level of fidelity that we've never had before. One human is the most complex entity in the universe. There's more neuronal connections in the brain than there are stars in the known universe, to give you a sense. So one human is extraordinarily complex, but now the machine is allowing us to unpack it. So what we're able to do is map you as a human with all the pathways and with all the biomedical pathways, biochemistry in your body, to a digital twin that sits on the computer. So who cares? Well, we do, because I can train that twin on a bunch of different workouts, diets and things 1,000 million times before you ever have to eat more broccoli. So we can optimize you on the machine before we then go out and try and work with you in the real world. Isn't that cool? Where it's really going to be cool, and what we're doing right now, is we can optimize you based on whatever's happening in your body, and then see what's the best things you should be eating, drinking, and if you get sick, what's the best combination of therapies to make you healthy again, not just the generic version of what everyone does over the counter or even from a doctor. Even cooler is your twin can sit there spinning around every day and run around the world looking for the latest developments and new drugs and things, and say, hey, based on your particular condition, this drug that's appeared over in some part of the world, you look like a good candidate, can even sign you up for a clinical trial. So it's getting extraordinary. The best part about AI for us is that it's going to unpack a world of human understanding that we haven't had ever, and helping people at every age and every level is going to become a scalable. The synthetic side of that conversation there means we can actually take a version of you and make about 30,000 replications with little variants, and we can check to see what happens if we were to genetically shift things for you. We're not quite there yet. And then in the 10%, this is the coolest stuff, and this is where AI and the human get together in a way that no one really understands. When I was presenting at a government program recently, we said, hey, in the next few years, we're going to actually have much better BCI. So when you're working on a computer, you just think of the command and it'll happen. You get the drill. So we come up with one of the bad Claude pictures, I think, or one of the Gemini. I presented this and they're like, ooh, that's cool. A few days later, one of our partners in the world of human performance is a psychometrician. Actually, his claim to fame is he built the back end to eHarmony back in the day. For those of you over 40, remember that's the original dating app. And he, as a quadriplegic, had these arrays, digital arrays implanted permanently in his skull. And this is not a new science. Things in the motor complex, so motor cortex, this part of the brain which controls movement. There's been lots of indwelling electrodes for many, many years to allow people to think about picking up a glass or drive their a wheelchair or move things around or play chess. That's not new. What's new is the one in the front here, in what we call the area of prefrontal cortex or executive function. That's where you make all the emotional, conscious decisions, all those high-level functions. What's crazy is he's now connecting, as you can imagine, this is connected to an AI, a machine. The machine can read everything he's doing and start to understand. And we think, because we don't really know how the machine works, no one does, and we don't know how the brain works, but they're starting to communicate with a new language, we think. So it seems to be something that's happening without our awareness. What's crazier is that if he sort of starts to work with the machine to solve problems, he says to us, I'm solving these problems with the machine, and I don't know how, we don't know how, But he says he's using the force, so that's good enough for us. Another level of crazy is that this don't only read, they write. So at some point here, the machine starts writing back to his executive function. So if you can think of a very advanced supercomputer of AI writing to a brain that's an even more advanced supercomputer, what could possibly go wrong? What's happening in the early stages before they let the whole thing out of a box and we end up with Skynet is he is saying it's now creating these sensations, these feelings, these emotions. There's no language for it. So this is the very frontier of human-machine teaming. It's an staggering, he's doing it for the betterment of science. So we understand the brain more deeply. We understand how humans function. How can we correct problems? How can he potentially walk again? But there's also another, if you remember in the 10%, I'm talking about 5 to 10 years. There's a very ethical conversation emerging as should we turn that machine on and have the machine and the human? Because if the AI is brilliant and his brain's brilliant and they start running together, what does that create? There's a question. There'll be a test at the end of this for the answer to that one. So, with all that happening, just wanted to give you a snapshot into our world. Again, nothing particularly useful there for you, but a very interesting perspective to consider as you move into this space. We had a great presentation with an actual accurate rendering of when artificial general intelligence happens. We made one up, but it doesn't really matter the timeline. At some point here, the machine is smarter than us and smarter than the cumulative of us. And, you know, even if it's not AGI, in a couple of years, they reckon it'll hit about a 300 or 400 IQ, which is, you know, Einstein had about $160 or 70. So who cares once it's smarter than us? What does that mean, though? When we think about in terms of intellectual capital and the human, for many, many centuries, we've been evolving as a race and a society where we value the knowledge, and there's a value proposition to that knowledge, correct? What happens when knowledge is worthless? Or not worthless, but free? I don't know. You guys can figure it out. We do know, though, that it creates a massive opportunity, and I'll get into that. Already, our most advanced programs are some form of human-machine teaming. You're all doing it. You work with Netflix or whatever, your computers right now. You're already interacting with a machine. In the more advanced programs, very aggressive machines in the boardroom, machines on the team, machines interacting, platforms, robotics, all that sort of thing. The most advanced teams in the world are deeply focused on how to bring the best out of the machine-human collaboration. Does that make sense? Obviously, this is very challenging because the machine is getting smarter all the time. But what it also provides, and in the balance of this equation, is a chance for us to focus more on the human. So, when we think about it and when we're training, there's no point in trying to keep up with the machine and the knowledge and the tacit volume of information that it has. Yeah, you can argue it hallucinates a little and all the rest of it, but most of the machines now are sure as hell much smarter than me. So pretty quickly, and think they're going to get about 5,000% better in the next 3 years or whatever the prediction is. But what the machine can't do, and you heard a little bit again this morning, empathy, compassion. So if I'm in the business of training humans, where am I going to now have to focus in the next 5 to 10 years? It ain't rocket science. Our world is shifting from the knowledge and the skill base to the human focus, which is wonderful. It means we can actually sit down and start talking to each other again. Yeah. We call it the human-machine paradox. It's a made-up term. It sounds cool. Really, it speaks to the idea that the machine is off and running, the platforms, the agents, the intelligence is going to just keep getting better and better to some point, who knows what. They call it the AI singularity, that moment where it really surpasses our ability to assess what, you know, the level of function it has. But really, that means the paradox is as the more technically focused that becomes, the more opportunity we have to be human again. So our whole process now is shifting from more of the classical side of the shop, the skills, the hard skills, the technical skills, to who are you? Who are you when things get tough? Who are you when things are going well? What's your creativity like? And our most advanced teams, even in the most tactical spaces, are focusing on this, not on the skills anymore. So as you're building your companies, think about this. So, I'm not going to get into the weeds on all of these. I know the conference has a little bit of focus on creativity, and I'll mention character because they're both deeply intertwined. But everyone always asks about spirituality. We measured every one of our talents over all these years. The one thing that always stands out across all the domains of performance excellence is that they all stand for something bigger than themselves. So when we were trying to get Felix ready to jump from the edge of space and he had a couple of challenges, we sat down with him, and that's the plaque we built with him. And we said, hey, when you're 30, 40 years' time, and you're sitting down next to your grandkids, what's the story you want to tell? How do you want to be remembered? Because he got all hung up in all the technology and all the other things that had to happen to make this event successful. And that was the breakthrough that he made. Unfortunately, if you know, he passed away a few weeks ago doing what he loved, paragliding in the Mediterranean somewhere. But the best part about his story was he overcame his deepest challenges and threats and fears by recognizing deeply what he wanted to stand for, something bigger than himself. So, if we think about that in the context of all the things you're doing, finding meaning and purpose in the world is now going to become more important than ever. And I'll get to that point here in a minute. Let's talk about character. Again, some of our communities, some of our programs focus deeply on the sort of themes that focus 100% on how a person shows up. With respect to character, we're really good at selecting for it, for the most part. We just make it more and more miserable until we see who you really are. Are you the first person to push their mates out of the way to get out of the water, or are you the last person there helping the others survive? It's not a foolproof, but it really is what the world has focused on for many years. Thankfully, we've gotten better at that in the last few years. It's still part of a selection event. But if you wanted to train character and you wanted to build character, we anchored on a model that Peter Rare developed. And if you want to get to the weeds of this, and it's a really good book to read, it's Better Humans, Better Performance. He's one of our advisors, great human, wonderful human. He summarizes the whole snapshot here: character before competence. You know, in some teams they call it the no dickhead rule. I'm Australian, so I can swear. But the reality is, who the person is becoming increasingly more important than what they can do. Because we can teach you to do anything, or if the machine's doing everything, you just have to be a good human again. So he came up with this graph, which I love, and he has on the bottom left there, if you're building a team or you're even looking at your own world, the balance between character and competency. Bottom left, low character, low confidence. You basically suck at selection. You've picked the wrong person. But I did present to a tech company recently, and they said, but those people are really cheap. I said, yeah, that's one way of looking at it. What we are striving for the most part, is the bottom right. Good humans with threshold competence, because we can train you to do anything. Now, threshold might be pretty high, and you'll hear from Jürgen later, the threshold for his community was very high, but it's still a threshold. Once you're above that threshold, and what do they select for? Character. So we want to think about those people who, if a high character person doesn't know a skill, what are they going to do? They'll admit it. I don't know this, I'm going to learn it. Great. We obviously want high competency, high character, but we sure as hell never want high competence, low character. That is the most dangerous thing in any organization. And more recently, research has come out, one bad actor takes 4 good actors to balance just the shitstorm they create. And that's just the behaviors. That's the feeling they create in the room. You've all worked in organizations where that one bad actor creates problems for everybody. And you can think around the world right now. The challenge we have is maybe the most profitable company in the world. You can have a high competence, make a lot of money. But if you control a lot of the world's resources or actions or AI platforms, I'll leave it at that, but you don't really care about humanity, we're in for an interesting conversation. So I'm not going to name names because I'll probably get arrested, but the reality is, you know who we're talking about. So great conversation. Again, there's a whole week's worth of work we could talk about character, but let's now talk about creativity. When I was at Red Bull, if you look at the top left and the bottom right, the talent we were working with in the action sports world was obviously hyper creative. not the traditional sports world where they've sort of flattened a lot of the creativity out, even though it still exists, but it's a much harder bar. In the action sports world, especially during the early 2000s, it was just... So athletes, people pushing creativity, and we had to learn how to manage and train creativity at the edge. So not just creativity for, again, in a comfortable environment, but creativity where everything was on the line, including your life. So it's a very interesting conversation. But then halfway through that program, Rebel said, well, we have all these musicians and artists and filmmakers and dancers. We need you to actually help them be their best selves on stage, whatever it may be, next record. So we had to think about how do we actually support that community. So being a brand new world of human performance optimization, really untouched, we figured, well, why don't we ask? So we built a project called Hacking Creativity. And at the time, again, you're talking 2012. So this is before all the modern LLMs and all the platforms. But we even back then, using some military connections, were able to build a model of intelligence that went out and read every research paper. Now, this was a big deal back then. I think Microsoft just announced something yesterday that does it automatically for you now. But it read all the research on creativity, how to train it, how to learn about it, what it meant. But that wasn't enough. We knew there was something missing. So who knows the photo of the gentleman on the right there? Any skateboarders in the room? That's a stretch, I think. Rodney Mullen, the father of modern skateboarding. All the highest performing people who weren't just in the artistic world in the classical sense, but were pushing the edge of a program or a sport or whatever it may be. We had rocket scientists, we had NASA engineers, we had all sorts of creatives in there. And we asked them. And then at the end of this program, we asked everybody else in the world that would participate. About 15,000 people eventually signed up and asked them about their creative process. And then we used, again, this is where the machine started to show us the potential. Flattened all that data, boom. What did it show us? Well, lots of things. One, pretty much everybody's creative. A lot of people don't even identify because it's not in the class. I don't write music, I don't play an instrument, or I don't write poetry, but everybody has a creative thread. In fact, evolutionary, we're designed for creativity. A lot of people, I think, have forgotten to access it. Other people have focused on it and created careers out of it, but that's irrelevant. We also found that everyone has their own creative style, which is really important. Certain people like to come up with ideas, in the classical sense, quiet. Other people need the energy of the room. So we started to build programs where we would actually take people and put them in the right environment to match their creative style, or put people on a creative team with different types of creative styles to get that collision. The thing that we figured out was that it is very trainable. Again, we're not making you a Picasso, so you've got to get off that sort of narrative. But improving your creative process. And this was way before the machine showed us the opportunity that this is going to be one of the superpowers moving forward. So someone who stands for something, someone who has good character, shows up in the right way at the right time. And it's not about being perfect. It's just intentionally wants to do the right thing is all we ask, and has the ability to think a little differently and create. That's going to be the 3 superpowers moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years from our lens. But then we realized, well, guess what? Actually, even in classical sports, like, the ones everybody's watching, the hyper elite, the people that really stand out above everyone else, reimagine what's possible. And how do we know? Because once they've played that sport, the sport's never the same again. So they've reimagined, even in those constrained environments, a way to win, a way to do things differently. So we realized creativity was just about winning. Again, in Jürgen's world, you'll hear later, it's about problem solving. In Ben's world, it's about creation, like coming up with that new wonderful entertainment that taps the emotions. So we did a double deep dive into this, and we realized that this was just an untapped opportunity to bring people forward through this space, and we could train it. So we came up with models to actually build creativity in people, but also, more importantly, I think for this room, how do you lead a room of creatives? It's a much tougher job to have a couple of people in your room that are just executing. It's a much tougher to have a highly creative group than people who are just executing. Now, you need both. So we came up with this model and spat out this general idea. You've got to be brilliant at Imagineering. And I think this is a skill that many of us are losing because we are, and I'll challenge you a little, don't rely on the machine to do all that. Like earlier this morning, you have to still come up with that cool idea. Challenge yourself to come up with that interaction or that interface with the machine. Once you've come up with a big, bold idea that no one's ever seen or believed, you've got to sell it. So there's a sales piece to it. You've got to then build a very different team for hyper-creative work. I think you all understand. The process itself, this is where AI is genius. Prompting, interacting with these different models. I think we just saw the Sora example, playing with these creative tools to challenge you, to give you new ideas. It's a wonderful, wonderful space for the AI to sit in. But the biggest thing is uncertainty. If you're doing something that's never been done, at some point, guaranteed it's going to go pear-shaped. And when it does, you've got to know how to deal with that. So we go back to our original model. There are institutions around the world who spend centuries figuring out how to deal with massive uncertainty under a ton of pressure. First responders, surgeons, military. So we rip all those stories in and we train you like that. So anyway, those hackers were looking like they were getting trained more like special operators or Coast Guard. Same program. And then obviously at the end of the day, you've got to bring it all together. So I'm getting to the end of the whole talk here. The point being, if you dig into this side of the shop of human endeavor, the creative side, and there's so many great resources, I spend a lot of time just studying music and the artists and musicians, all those wonderful documentaries on, Lady Gaga's journey, Bruce Springsteen's journey, all the old stuff that I listen to, the Stones. I've studied all that, musicians, filmmakers, the latest Light and Magic, the one about the process that they built for the Star Wars and all those engineers programs around creating movies. As part of our Hacking Creativity project, one of our individuals was had the opportunity to interview Ray. And I'm just going to use his little excerpt from his interview here, because when you listen to how he speaks about creativity and his creative process, you'll see, or hopefully a few light bulbs will come on. So pay attention to what he's saying, and then I'm going to bring it back at home and we'll wrap it all up.
All instruments whip you, because sometimes they won't do what you want them to do. Of course, the instrument will say, no, it ain't me, it's you.
Right.
The instrument talks back. You never can overwhelm an instrument. All you can do is get to you can bring yourself to your own competence. But there's always more left in the instrument.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Sure.
You will never get out all of this piano what's in it.
Yes.
An instrument can bring you to your limits.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that really what creativity in a sense is about?
Yeah, if you can think of it.
Right.
See, that's the key.
Right.
Make it to create it in your mind.
It's the tool for transformation.
Yes. There you got it. That's a great way to put it. See, now why not think of that?
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, you got to give it up for Ray. What was his instrument? What's your instrument? AI. What did he say? You'll never get out of this instrument what's all in it. You'll never get out of the machine. It's got us on the tacit knowledge base. So what's our responsibility? Bring ourselves up to that level. We've got to challenge ourselves. If he can do anything, we've got to lift. The human's got to bring itself up now. The trick is you got to train yourself to think of it. So as you interact with the machine in the next few years, one last thing, think about how you're showing up. Even when you're sitting down to chat, don't ask it just to do your emails. In fact, that's important, but that's like, using a howitzer to kill an ant. Think about how you can challenge the smartest entity that's ever existed on the planet in a way that brings the best of you forward. And so the last comment will be, and I'll let you read it, and I'll be done, is it's not a cry that AI is going to take over the world or be dangerous. It has the potential to. I think what it really means is it's up to us to how to interface with it. I think there is a challenge to refocus as humans. The fact that you're all in a room together, we're seeing more of that, people gathering. I think the real wonderful opportunity ahead is, again, let the machine take all the heavy lifting off the table and let us triple down on what it means to take care of each other, look after each other, and bring that empathy, compassion, courage, creativity to the forefront. So with that, I'm done. Thank you very much, everybody.
That's a wrap for this episode of the AI for Business podcast. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit subscribe and pass it along to a friend or colleague. We appreciate you being here, and we'll catch you in the next one.